Powered by Go Sports in partnership with TSN. It is season 4, and this is episode 22 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Ray, it's the rare double guest. We've got Dave Nonis, who's going to swing by for his bi-monthly visit, which I don't know about you, man, but I find those enlightening and educating because, you know, you clearly have the mind of an NHL general manager, and there's enough stuff going on around the NHL that it's nice to be able to pick his brain to, you know, think of how they're processing as, you know, we push 26, 27 games into the regular season.
Yeah, the best part about that to me is that we can all think we know how a general manager thinks, except there's not anything going on that Dave hasn't run through in his long career as being in management, whether he was an assistant or the head. And, you know, whether the team was going good, team was going bad, somewhere in the middle, he's run through all of that. So, yeah, I'm with you. I like it a lot. I'm enjoying it.
How about the night Tage Thompson, the Buffalo Sabres, had at the expense of the Columbus Blue Jackets? Tage Thompson, a 6-point game, 5 goals, and an enormous shout out to Nicole Hendricks and the Buffalo Sabres public relations people, right? Because you alerted me last night saying, hey, I mean, I'm watching it unfold, of course, and we can see, you know, what Tage Thompson is doing in this assault of the Columbus Blue Jackets, but you're like, hey, we should reach out and see if he'll come on the podcast. And automatically I'm like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, maybe next week he'll be, and then I'm like, no, I think Ray means let's try and get him on tomorrow, being as we're recording. So flip out the text to Nicole. Any chance of grabbing Tage for 10 minutes or so? Yeah, let me get back to you. 10 minutes later, you know, how's 10:30 tomorrow morning? Does that work for you? You know, look, I mean, there's so many great PR departments in the National Hockey League. We're fortunate, right? But you would know this as a former player. You know, these guys are pulled in so many different directions.
More now than ever. More now
than ever. And Tage is a young father. Probably the last thing he wants or needs to do is another interview. But again, Tage Thompson joining us.
I'm going to say this for our podcast. I can guarantee you we will have a double guest every time somebody scores 5 goals in an NHL game. Because
one time.
That's it. Because so I was at Riley's soccer game, and so it gets to the half. It's freezing cold. We're in like full winter gear. They're running around out there. You know, they're 16, so they're doing their thing. And I look and I'm like, 6-0 in the first period. Like, what exactly has happened there? And then I was like, oh, Thompson. Like, amazing night, and really, really pumped that he agreed to come on.
Better than you expected. Well, we'll ask Nonis about this as well. But I mean, he was just this big, tall, gangly sort of giraffe out there when he landed from the St. Louis Blues. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't see this. I you know what he did last year. What did he score? 38 goals last year. 38. So it's not a fluke what he's doing this year by any stretch. But holy smokes, I mean, this kid seems to have it all.
Yeah, you know what? A guy like him would be really hard and really interesting to project, which of course the Blues were doing when they made that trade for Ryan O'Reilly. Buffalo wanted futures, and Tage Thompson was a big part of it. But the reason it's interesting to me is at his size, you know, 6'6" or 7, he's always going to be a late bloomer. He's always, if he's going to get it, he's going to be a late bloomer because your athleticism and your coordination and your strength has to catch up to that enormous frame. And clearly it took him a little bit of time, but I said this before, and I love comparisons to players that I played against, because to me it helps put them in a context that I can understand. He's the closest to Mario Lemieux that I've seen. At that size, with those hands, did you see his one-timer last night was like a freaking cannonball. Like it was
Ovechkin-like, right? Like just
but he's the closest at that size that I've seen. Like I would never say a 5'8" guy reminds me of Mario Lemieux. You got to be 6'6". Yeah. And there's not many of those. Thompson is, oh man, he is just, and he's so fun to watch. He's got the dangleitis, man. He's got D falling all over the place. I just love it.
Headlines once again this season represented by our friends at Boston Pizza. Again, Tage Thompson of the Buffalo Sabres, fresh off a 5-goal performance against the Blue Jackets. One of our guests, Dave Nonis, former general manager, also stopping by. So let's quickly peruse the headlines. And I felt like we should start with Colorado. They're treading water right now, and it's mostly because of the injury bug. And Nate McKinnon's now sidelined for the better part of a month. That's the projection of the Colorado Avalanche. So do they continue to try and tread that water, or, does Chris McFarland look for some help? It's easy to say, yes, look for some help, but then these players come back and you've got a salary cap that you've got to wrestle with. So it's not that easy.
I don't know how they can look for help. It's one thing to put a guy on LTI, the long-term injury, but as we've seen and you mentioned, is that so when that player comes, say you go out and get a $5 million player, well, when player X comes back, you've got to do something with that $5 million. Like where is that going to go? Nobody has room to take any money on. Now, the health thing is really quite staggering. 5 of their top 6 is out. The only one that's standing upright is Mikko Rantanen. Everybody else is hurt. But it seems like they're, Evan Rodriguez is maybe 10 days or 2 weeks away. Nichushkin's starting to skate. Lekkonen's close. So if they can just kind of hold their head here for the next week or so, but it's not just, or 2 weeks, I guess 2 weeks. It's probably another 6 games or so. But it's not just there. They lose Josh Manson. Bo Byram's not playing again. It is team wide, and it is just shredded. All they can do is they could take some heart. I think that Georgiev has been really good for them. And so, as they look further down the road, like they're not dropping out of a playoff spot. They're 13-10-1. So they're, it's not like they're 6 games under 500 and they've got to try and miraculously claw their way back.
Okay, next topic here. We'll talk to Dave Nonis about this, and I suspect he'll shoot it down as others have. But the salary cap has killed creativity for the most part, right? You think of management creativity, and you think of McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights and how they always seem to step in front of it in their quest to win that elusive Stanley Cup. So on insider trading, I throw out the idea that why wouldn't Edmonton? Of course, Edmonton's interested in Erik Karlsson. Like, any team with a need for an offensive defenseman has interest in Erik Karlsson. I'm not naive enough to think that it's near impossible to make it work because of the salary cap. But, when you've got McDavid and Draisaitl and some of the other elements that they have, it's not that the window is closing, but contractually it kind of is, right? So I think they look at the next 3 years as being crucial in that quest to win a Stanley Cup. So, this isn't Kenny Holland's first rodeo here, but would you be more willing to explore every wild scenario, Karlsson included, or would you just face reality and, you know what, maybe it's Edmondson, maybe it's another more defensive, affordable guy that is going to plug a hole for me, and let's see how it goes.
If I'm Kenny Holland, I'm sitting in that chair and I'm saying to my assistant managers and my pro scouts, the head of my pro scouting department, bring me any scenario you think can improve this team. And then we'll look at if it's at all possible. Like any scenario you can come up with. Let's bring it on. Let's take a look at it. Let's pull it apart and say, yes, it can work, or yes, we can pursue it, or we can't even look at it. Yeah. You got to, Karlsson's $11.5 million, right? So there's going to have to be if there is a trade for Erik Karlsson this year, there's going to be a third team in it.
Or San Jose retains a pile, right?
But
40%.
I think it's both.
It could be both. Yeah.
And so, because then the acquiring team can actually have a chance at affording the contract. And so that makes the difficulty of it, it goes tenfold. I mean, you got to think somehow Chicago or Arizona is going to be involved in these brokering deals over the next year or so. But I think that one's just I just don't see how it fits in Edmonton. I don't, you can only put so much sand in a 5-pound glass, and they're at 5 pounds.
Well, I mean, the media was quick to shoot it down. It's always amazing to me how these ideas just get blasted. I mean, it's an idea. That's what hockey operations departments, to your point, do. They sit down and go, okay, if top of class is Erik Karlsson, somebody try and get inventive and try and figure out how we could possibly do this,
because Dregs, right? So you get the analytics department in to start looking.
Yeah.
The pro scouts, because you got to make a trade. The amateurs, how many draft picks do we have? The assistant managers who have started to coordinate all this information. And then you throw it all on the table and you go, this stuff doesn't work. That stuff maybe can work. Let's look at that.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right. We don't talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets very often. We just don't. And there's reason to. And normally you would think it would be a positive reason because – they signed Johnny Gaudreau. They've got Patrick Laine, who's back on the ice. He's back healthy again. And he's always fun to watch when he's scoring goals and the way he plays. But man, was he pissed off after that Buffalo loss. And understandably so. Like he said, they didn't show up. They didn't play at all in that game. It really looks to me, smells to me like Columbus is looking at the draft. They're looking at Bedard in 2023, and it kind of reminds me, and this is going back 2003, Ray, and Jamie Rutherford at the time was with the Carolina Hurricanes, and I know this because Paul Maurice told me the story. Rutherford went to Paul, who's coaching the Hurricanes, around Christmas and said, hey, we had an okay start. We're back to where I think we're going to be, which isn't very good. Just to be 100% transparent, you're not getting any help. I'm not helping you. Sorry. This is what you're going to deal with, because they looked at the Eric Staal. So they draft Eric Staal second overall in 2003. They were looking that far ahead at the June draft.
Do you know what I'm laughing at about that?
That matters more to me.
I'm laughing at that for two reasons. One, of course, the bluntness of Jim Rutherford at that point. And then Paul Maurice, that's 20 years ago. I know he started when he was 28, but he was still a pretty young guy.
He's still young.
And by the way, you're not getting anything. Good luck.
Good luck.
I will tell you, though, that you can have that view, but if that's indeed where Jarmo Kekalainen and the Blue Jackets get to, Dregs, what's happening between now and then is you're looking at your team and going, who quit? Who's not interested? Because I don't want them here.
Yeah.
You can do good work for your future while your team is looking at the draft, because it's going to be addition by subtraction in some cases, because you cannot go out and give up 6 goals in the first period in your home rink and not have any pushback, any fight. And look, hey, Zach Werenski's a fabulous player, and he's not there. He's gone for the year. They lost Nick Blankenship the same day. Their defense,
right.
Their defense just got carved and caved in, but you cannot allow that. So between now and then, if they're looking at the draft, it's about who's going to be here at the draft, or are those guys going to go somewhere else?
Those are your headlines. Thanks again to Boston Pizza. Our interviews on Ray and Dregs this year brought to you by Canadian Club Whiskey, who are asking, are you over beer? If the answer to that is yes, say try a refreshing CC ginger ale. Throw in some lime next time you're having a drink or watching a game.